Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on best practices on how to work effectively from home. As you're joining in, you're going to see a poll on the screen. It's just a little bit to know kind of where you are at while you're coming in to this call. We're so excited you'll be joining us today. I want to get a sense of if this is your first time, or if you're working from home all the time, and just get a sense of how you're feeling about it at the moment. It's a new space for all of us. So thanks for filling that poll as you come in today. We'll give just a few minutes here and then we'll get rolling. So thanks for joining us today. And please hit that poll as you're coming in. Awesome. Some of you are voting. It's looking like this is my first time working from home ever. I've worked from home before. It looks like there's some experience there. One thing I want to make clear as you come in is in the chat panel, if you hit the chat at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button next to the chat where you can select to chat with all panelists and attendees. We'd love for you guys to be able to talk with each other as we have this conversation as a community today. So you can toggle to that, and we're excited to get started in just a few minutes here. Awesome. Looks like some of you are somewhere in between loving and hating this new working space. I know it's a new experience for many of us, and I'm glad and excited to talk about some best practices today that I've learned from a friend of mine and that I've been experiencing myself. So take a moment to vote on that poll as you guys are coming in. Give just about another minute here. Thank you for jumping in, taking that poll. Looks like most of you have voted, 91%. We'll end it in just a second here. Awesome, great. Great to see you, Adam. Great to see you, Barry. Thanks for jumping in. Some new names that I haven't been able to meet, so I'll reach out in the chat or say hello. If you want to put in the chat where you're coming from today, I know we've got some people from New York, some folks from different areas, so put in the chat where you're coming from today. Love to get a sense of geographically where everybody's at. Sandy, great to hear from you. Tony, always a great pleasure to have you on with us. Fantastic, great. Well, good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and we can get started today. I'm going to share the results with you that it looks like for the majority of us, this is the first time that we've worked from home ever, about 42%. Some of us have worked from home before. There are a few of us who have worked from home all the time. So I'd love to hear if these best practices have been experienced by you as well. And select the answer that describes how you're feeling about working from home. Some are loving it. No one said they're hating it. That's good. And a lot of you said you're somewhere in between. So this is a new experience for all of us, and I'm glad that we get to have this conversation today to talk about some best practices of how we can be more effective in this space. As we get started today, I just have a couple sort of directions and maybe some suggestions to get the most out of our time together. First of all, my name is Dave Salsiccioli. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Coachwell, for those of you I haven't met. And we've been really enjoying being able to host these free conversations with members of our community and those that we haven't met yet to really support our community during this time in any way that we can. So again, thank you for joining in. Our objective today is to gain some practical insight on what it looks like to be a more effective work from home worker. Many of you shared many of the common challenges to register for this webinar, and those are pretty consistent for all of us. So I'm excited that we get to jump into some practical insight and best practices today. The agenda is, I'm going to be, in a moment here, I'm going to bring on Justin Wynn. Him and his wife, Erica, they are the owners of Real Simple Good Life, which is a food and lifestyle blog and website that has some incredible resources. And he's going to be able to share some of his experience moving from corporate finance to running a business from home for the past 4 years, and also now bringing in a new beautiful daughter into that space. Her name is Nora, they're just a great couple, and he has some great practices, best practices for us. Throughout, there's going to be a couple things that come up on the screen. There will be some polls just for you to answer a question to keep you engaged. And I would also encourage you that we're going to have some Q&A time at the end. So in the Q&A panel at the bottom, please put your questions there, and we'll be answering those live towards the end. Also, use the chat feature to chat with the panelists and attendees. We have some team members moderating that space, and so I appreciate you engaging with us in that way. Know that we're also going to be sending out a replay and also the links and the slides that we're presenting today so that they can be a resource for you. So I want to take just a couple minutes here to set some context for the moment that we're in today. I know for me, this is not the first time I've worked from home, but the first time that I've worked from home consistently in this way. As I shared in my quick video a couple days ago, remote working and working from home has been on the rise for many years. And I think that this crisis will elevate that conversation for many companies and many organizations around the US and frankly around the world. But it's estimated right now by Forbes that possibly 46% of US businesses have implemented some work from home policies. And so many of us are thrust into this new experience and are figuring out what it looks like to be effective in this space. So it presents some challenges, like I shared: having the right technology, finding a good space to work. I'm in my bonus room today, and if you hear my kids running around, that's because I've got 3 of them, and they can be a bit rowdy. Dealing with distractions, time management, feeling disconnected from my team and my larger community. What's missing is that time to just sort of talk around lunchtime or passing each other as we move from our offices or walking around at our place of work. So some of that is missing. I don't know about you, but daily motivation and just focus has been a challenge for me, and I know for many of you. So if you're experiencing these challenges, that's why you're here today, and I'm excited that we get to jump into that. So as we get going, I want to invite my friend Justin Wynn to come on, and he's going to share real quick. We're just going to have some conversation about his story, how he's transitioned from like I said, corporate finance in the Portland area to his current situation. And then we're going to dive right into walking through these 10 best practices, sharing some practical tools and tips that each of us can apply into this new working from home space that we're in. So I want to invite Justin on. So Justin, I'll invite you on, and we'll see you come up in just a minute. Awesome, fantastic. Thanks, Justin, for joining us today. It's been great, the conversations we've been preparing for this webinar. So give us a sense of your experience, your background, and sort of the different areas of work that you've worked in, and what's led you to working from home and the business that you're in today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave, for having me today. I think Erica and I, like Dave said, my wife Erica and I run our food and lifestyle blog called The Real Simple Good Life. But in our former lives, we were actually both in the corporate accounting and finance world. So I was there for about a decade doing public accounting and then corporate accounting. And so before we kind of switched this, we were both in the office / cubicle environment, working with teams and kind of your normal office environment. And we started our food blog kind of on the side for about a year before switching to it full time. But about 4 years ago, we kind of took a big jump in our careers and decided to get rid of the corporate accounting gig and actually go full time on focusing on our blog. And it was, it was a really huge change for us, probably like a lot of people are going through right now. It sounds really awesome to work for yourself and work from home, but it's such a monumental shift from that corporate environment to creating your own structure, being disciplined, avoiding the distractions, and not just kind of hanging out on your couch and with your computer and TV on and stuff on the background. So it took us a long time to really kind of make that transition. I think I tell everyone it was like the first year was really tough for us, creating that structure and really working on what best processes were for us, what was our optimal schedule, putting the structure in place, and like basically being accountable to ourselves and running our business. So I think we have kind of a unique perspective. Ours was kind of self-inflicted that we were working from home, where everyone else is now kind of thrown into this, but we've developed a lot of tips and practical advice that we're excited to share, and hopefully you guys can take away some of these. And I guess the one thing I would say going into this is a lot of these best practices aren't just for working from home. They're around focus and productivity and managing energy and things like that. And they all are great in the corporate setting as well. So they're just a little different. You have different distractions at home than at the office, and you have different morning routines, and we'll go into that. But I think keep that in mind, that these aren't just tips for working from home, but I think they're things that you can take away and apply to kind of your everyday life going forward, hopefully.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Justin. I'm glad you did. There is a bit of a romanticism maybe around, working from home, right? I'm going to be able to have more flexibility and stay in my my sweatpants all day. But I think maybe for some of you, and you can put it in the chat down here, maybe some of that romanticism has worn off a little bit now that we've been in it for a little while. I know that it's felt that way a little bit for me. But you also bring up the point that so many of these best practices are also applicable for when and if we enter back into the workspace in a traditional sense, right? They're all about self-leadership and self-management. And so I hope that these practices you can build in, and they can be long-term rituals and habits that will provide benefit even past this, right? Is that kind of what you're saying, Justin, and alluding to?
Yeah, I think some of these are actually or tactics that I used to use, and I just apply them a little differently in the home setting. Some of them are kind of completely new that I developed, but yeah, I've always been really interested in kind of productivity tricks and things like that and being efficient. In my old world, it was really driven by, I didn't really like my job and I wanted to maximize my time and just kind of at the time to leave, I'm good. I've done all my work, but it's always been a focus of mine. It's just I think you just maybe apply the tips a little differently depending on working from home versus the environment.
Yeah. Well, good. So I'm excited. We're going to jump into the deck and jump into these 10 best practices in just a minute. But so Justin, now you're 4 years into building this business. Give us just a quick 30-second overview of the blog, the website, and sort of what that represents for you and your wife, Erica. And then we'll jump right into the deck.
Yes, sure. So our blog is mainly focused on food, kind of real food recipes, healthy recipes. That's what we started out doing. And in the last 6 months or so, we've also been sharing a lot of these lifestyle tips that we've developed over the years. So we found that food is usually a gateway drug, we like to call it, of being healthier overall and having a healthy lifestyle. So we're also sharing tips around healthy habits and mindset and community and things like that, more of a holistic, healthy lifestyle approach. So our goal is to help you on the food side, but also help you kind of live an overall healthy lifestyle with the resources we provide.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Are you ready to jump into these best practices? All right, let's do it. So I'm going to share here real quick. Awesome. Perfect. So let me jump ahead here. Some of the common challenges that you guys shared were all around distractions, time management, staying focused, motivation, kids at home. I know is a very unique situation right now for all of us. Um, and and so these were some of the common challenges that you shared when you registered for the webinar. And we want to address these today. So let's start by jumping into tip number one. So Justin, I'd love for you to lead us through. Talk to us about this morning routine. What does this look like for you, and what have you learned in this space?
Yeah, so we put this number one because I think it's super important for everyone. Because if you think about it, you used to have a morning routine when you went to the office. It kind of consisted of a handful of things that you just did every day, whether it's taking a shower, getting dressed, brushing your teeth, eating breakfast, a little time with the kids, or whatever it was. And then you'd kind of physically go out the door and you'd have either a walk or a ride or a drive, and you had some time to kind of transition from that home space to your workspace. And not only was it a physical change, but it was a mental change because you went from kind of home you to work you. So this, I think, is really critical now that you're not really leaving your house to kind of look at your morning routine and really kind of define what it needs to be now to be successful. So kind of my tips here are just think of like a few things that you can do that kind of get your day going that you could do routinely every day. So for some people, it's still very important and very helpful to take a shower, to get dressed, to kind of have that same kickstart and work start to your day. Some people, a friend of ours, makes sure he puts on shoes and takes a step out the door and kind of like that's his start to the day. But it's different for everyone. I think for us, we defined kind of some quick things in the beginning of the day that we did. We both really like doing meditation in the morning. Maybe you do a journaling or a reading or something like that, or maybe you do something physical. Maybe you work out in the morning. Whatever it is, just look on those things that you can kind of set yourself up for success. And I think at first at home, you really just have to keep it simple. Think of the couple things that you know work for you to get you going, and just make sure you do those consistently. You can always kind of adjust and refine as you need to. And then I think my bottom bullet point is also super important. Think about the things that you should not do to start your day because you know they're not productive for you. So it's easy to get distracted quickly nowadays, especially at home. If you have kids at home, or if you have just kind of a habit of checking social media or doing other things that aren't work related at home. So it's easy to fall into those TV on, social media on, the things that kind of might derail your day really quickly. So focus on making sure those aren't part of your morning routine before you get going to start the day.
Yeah, mindset is really important at this moment, right? And it's interesting. So, I think that it changes a little bit the morning routine now that maybe it's not, getting kids to school is maybe not part of the routine for other folks, and so we really have to sort of reimagine what this looks like a little bit, right? And pick out, like you said, what are a few high priority items or sort of pillars of my morning routine that I want to make happen. It might look a little bit different than before, but how can we do that at the moment? Justin, just quickly for you, what you talked about mindfulness or meditation. What are a few other things that you try to make sure happen in the morning that you feel like set you up for productivity and focus for the rest of the day?
I think for me, it's really just those few things. It's like get a cup of coffee going, do the meditation. I usually watch kind of a short little video or something. I think affirmations can be really helpful to kind of set the groundwork for your day. And we'll kind of talk a little bit in in the later slides, but knowing exactly what I'm going to do first thing in the morning is really helpful. So it kind of kickstarts the day as well.
That's great. So participants, if you want to put in the chat, what are a couple of things that you're making sure that you're building into your morning routine? Go ahead and throw those in at the moment. I'd love for us to get a few ideas rolling of what are those things for you. I can share for me that in preparation, we just had our third child 2.5 weeks ago. So even before this crisis, I was prepping to build a little home gym in my garage. And I'm so happy that I did, because that's become a normal part of my routine. And even though it looks a little bit different, like this morning, it was, all right, 20 minutes, I'm going to get on the bike. I'm going to, do a little bit of weightlifting, some pull-ups and push-ups and burpees. But it doesn't look the same, but I'm still trying to make sure that piece happens, and that energizes me. So I'm happy about that. Looks like you guys are sharing good breakfast with wife, some cardio, making bed, unloading dishwasher. Fantastic. So I'm going to launch a little poll here. I'd like for you guys to self-assess for just a minute here. And this is a sort of like a Likert scale. I have established a morning routine that helps me to start my day with focus, intention, and energy. Just answer quickly, is it a yes, sort of, or no? And this will give you, maybe you can jot down on a piece of paper, hey, this is an action step that maybe I could apply after this webinar, and think through, and even just sketch out on a piece of paper. These are the 3 things that I'm going to try to make happen at the beginning of my day. Good. Thanks for sharing. Walk and pray, scripture reading, coffee, working out. Fantastic. Yeah. Good. So I'll give you about a minute to answer that poll, and we can take a look at it there. Well, good. So it looks like many of you are sort of putting this into place, and I know that it takes a while to sort of reframe your mind from we are creatures of habit, and so this is asking us to change and to pivot and to adapt. And so I'm really happy to see that many of you have incorporated an effective morning routine, and some of you are in the middle of working on that. Happy to see that there's not a lot of no's there. That's encouraging, right, Justin? That's good.
Yeah, that's good. And I think if you're in that kind of middle sort of bucket, think of what's working for you right now, and think of what's not working for you, and maybe replace something that could kind of give you energy with something that's not really working for you, and that could maybe be a big difference in your productivity for the day.
Yeah, I wanted to bring our attention quickly. Janice said, FaceTime elderly mom. We're going to talk a little bit more about prioritizing human connection in the middle of this, right? And so that these regular rhythms of calling people and getting on Zoom calls and staying connected with family may become a part of our routine in a more present way than maybe in the past. So, well, good. Well, if you have any questions about that, number one, there's some great tips here on this link. And again, we'll be sending this out, how to start a healthy morning routine. Justin has a great post about that. And I would encourage you guys to check that out afterwards. So, well, good. So let's move on to number 2 here, Justin. Number 2 is establishing this workspace. So chat with me about how that's worked out for you, Justin, and we can kind of go back and forth on this best practice number 2.
Yeah, so I think to define your workspace is also key for kind of flipping the switch to start your day. So it's kind of rolling right off that morning routine and into work. So I think maybe if you've fallen into the bucket and you thought you were just working at home for a couple weeks with our current crisis and quarantine, you maybe just set up like a real super temporary space. Maybe it was the dining room table or whatever space you have. But I think since we know this is a little more long-term, I think it's worth looking at the space you're working in and making sure you're establishing kind of a work-only space. I think it's helpful to have a space that when you go into that space, you're always working and it's not kind of commingled with your personal life or kind of your family time. So usually maybe you have a dedicated office. We're lucky enough we have kind of an upstairs office, and it's nice to be able to go from kind of our family living space, which is mostly downstairs, to our upstairs office. It feels like a different area. So that's nice. But even if you don't have that, there's probably some small space. You don't need much in your home that's not being used at all that maybe you could kind of carve out as your work only space. So I think setting yourself up to be as productive as possible in that space, being comfortable, kind of make it like your mini office, and all the little things that you kind of need or you used to have at the office, kind of replicate that as much as possible. And I think it's very important to communicate with your family what this workspace means to you. So if you're at that workspace, they know when you're going into that space that that's your work time. You need to have kind of focus and minimize interruptions if possible. So I think it's important to communicate that with your family and not just assume that they know that when you're in that space, you shouldn't really be bothered or you're working. Because sometimes if you're working on the computer, it's hard to really tell what you're doing, you know. So establishing that chain of communication and knowing and letting them know that you need kind of that focused time to be on work or on a call or whatever it is important.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Justin. And I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Is it also, it's a bit of a mindset for us as well that, you know, I'm entering into the workspace, right? My work isn't every place in my house, that I'm sort of entering into a space. And so I think that mindset shift is also helpful for us in the same way that it might be helpful for the family and others in our context to sort of know this is the place where they're going to work. But I've certainly found that that if my computer is just basically wherever I want to go in the house, then it seems like I'm not really going to a place of work like we used to. You know, I went to the office, right? So does it also work that way for you in terms of mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's half the battle, and we'll talk about it at the end, but it helps it helps turn it on. And then if you leave that space, and it helps turn it off too. And I think that's, everyone's guilty of just always being on all the time. And it's just as important to end that day as kind of started. So I think having that physical space as much as possible helps you turn your mind on, and then also kind of leave it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, one point I wanted to add here, because we've been having some conversation with leaders about their work from home space. You have to think a little bit about ergonomics, right? I mean, at work, I've got a stand-up desk, and so I get to stand up, and I'm sort of around, and I'm finding myself a little bit more sort of hunched over the laptop. So think a little bit about how you can build some ergonomics into it too. So one way that I've done that is I have a high bar in my kitchen area, and so I've been transitioning a little bit between my office, my desk in my room and bonus room to that space as well, so I can stand up a little bit more and change my ergonomics. So just a quick thought there, but I think we have to consider that at the moment as well. So what I'd love to see is in the chat, just like before, give us a sense of what does your workspace look like? How are you able to have a space where you're working? Have you been able to establish that? And so I'm going to also launch another poll here with a quick question, quick self-assessment. The question is, I've created a work-only space that I've communicated with my family that helps me to remain productive throughout the day. I'd love to see how many of us are in this space and have been able to do that. Good. I'll give us just a couple seconds here to answer that. Again, if you find that this is a for sure no for you, this could be something you can jot down as maybe a best practice to try to apply after this, knowing that there's complications in terms of space and other things that we all have to consider. So let's look here. It looks like many of you, which is also encouraging, have been able to establish a space and establish a space that helps you remain productive and focused. So that's fantastic. Again, if you're in the sort of like Justin was suggesting earlier, think about maybe what's one or two things that I could do to make that a for sure yes, so that I'm feeling like I have that work only space. I want to bring up a couple things here. Olivia talked about, my hubby and I are attempting shifts going between the basement office and the dining room table. I have a client who had the same conversation. He's like, well, my wife this week gets the office and I get the kitchen table, and then next week we're going to shift. And so, especially if you have two of you or multiple of you working from home in the same space right now, it can be a little bit difficult. That is a unique challenge. So thanks, Olivia, for sharing that. And Megan, you also shared the same thing, that the dining room table has sort of become a space. Yeah, some challenges of sitting too much, Tony. So thanks for your thoughts, but obviously there's some unique challenges there. Justin, you talked about bonus tips over here. Try to have a good Wi-Fi connection. I know that I've had to upgrade my Wi-Fi. Many people have done that as well. If you can close the door, I do put in some AirPods with some music sometimes when I need to get really focused. So a few just bonus tips there. Anything you want to elaborate on that before we move on to best practice number 3?
No, I think it's really just like you said, we're actually kind of bad at this for how long we've worked from home, and it's kind of causing me to think of it. But just think about your setup, and if you're going to be working there all day, what makes it physically comfortable for you to be in that setting. Hunching over a laptop all day probably isn't the best. If you can stand up, or even if it isn't, you can't set up the space perfectly, just manage it through breaks and short walks or things like that you can kind of break up your day with.
Yeah, perfect. And so that brings us to best practice number 3 is just, and I'm going to kind of talk about 3 and 4 together because I think they really link with what you were just saying there, Justin. So, finding your best time to work, and this is a very unique challenge right now, both for you and maybe for teams and members that you're managing and having discussion with as well, right? With the unique challenge of maybe having multiple people at home, working from home, and kids, we're having to figure out when is the actual time that I can work. And so some people have been sharing that, I've recognized that actually if I can get up at 5 and work from 5 to 7, but without distraction, that's actually my most productive time. Or I work a little bit in the evening. And so our normal sort of 8 to 5 working experience has certainly changed. And so I want you to think about, when are you most productive? When are you most focused? For many, it isn't in those morning hours, right? And when can I be most focused, or negotiating around the schedules with the people in my context. Justin, we talked about trying to set up your schedule and work at least 1 hour during that most productive time. So if I can just get a couple of focused hours that I have time blocked out, which we'll talk about in the next best practice, that this is my time to get really focused and work on this project or this specific element of my job. Try to get that into wherever that productive time is. If it's morning, if it's sometime in the middle of the day, if it's possibly in the evening, depending upon what it looks like for you. And you've got we have a good note here. Focus on the important high priority work during this time. So I know that I think it was Deborah put a question in the chat there about answering email. Email, it may not be the most productive. Sometimes that can stack up. And so we have to think about eliminating distractions, being able to focus on very specific projects during our most productive times in the day, and then being able to plan other times where we're just scrolling through and answering emails and doing correspondence work. So separating those tasks can be really important, right, Justin?
Yeah, that's actually been a really huge one for me. This specific item has been big for Erica and I. We actually once we realized when our true kind of best time to work was, over the last year or so, actually, we kind of switched our schedule to really accommodate that and make sure we got that time. We used to kind of take our dog for a walk first thing in the morning, and that would actually take about an hour out of our day first thing in the morning, which is our most productive, energetic time. So all we did is we just, instead of doing that, we kind of started work earlier first thing and did our walk later in the day. But really that's been huge for us to just have, when you have the most energy, be focusing on that important work.
Yeah.
Because honestly, for me, email was a big one as well. I would check email first thing, and sometimes if there was a lot of email or if it was a negative email or something like that, I would start my day in kind of reaction mode. And if it's a bad email, it can kind of put you in a bad mood and it affects your whole mental state. So I started not checking email until a certain point in the day, which I've moved back slowly. I kind of started an hour after I started work, and then a little later each day. And that's been huge for me to just kind of mentally not have that dragging me down, honestly, and having just my own focused work on the important stuff that is important to me to work on, not someone else's priority in my inbox.
Yeah, and we're going to get to eliminating distractions here. It's tricky now because we have notifications on our phone or our Apple Watch or whatever, right? And we're dinged with all this incoming. But again, that can take away from maybe allowing us to use our most productive hours in the day, which are so limited at the moment, to get high priority items done. So figuring out when that is really important. So, my father, Greg, he sometimes calls, I'm going into e-jail, right? Because you can feel locked in that space and trying to correspond with everybody. And then it kicks off other tasks that you need to focus on. And pretty soon you've been in email response mode for a couple of hours, and it's like, oh my gosh, where'd the time go? And I've got all this other stuff that I need to produce. So that's an important piece there. So I'd love for you to go into the chat real quick. If you guys want to put a number or a time, when is your most productive time that you found, if you've been able to figure that out so far? When is your most productive time? Is it 5 to 7 a.m.? Is it 9 to 10? What is the time that you figured out, if you have, that is most productive for you? 9 to noon, Tony, thanks for sharing. Yeah, seems like the morning time, like we were discussing, Justin, might be that most focused. But if you're taking shifts, it can be a little interesting. First thing in the AM, awesome. Okay, lots of morning time. Fantastic. Well, good. I'm going to move on to the next one because it ties with this perfectly, in that being a coaching practice, we spend a lot of time talking about how do you actually structure and plan your day for highest productivity. I know this is a huge focus for you, Justin, and has been something that I've been really growing in this year, and so we can kind of go back and forth on how this has worked for us. But if you know what times are most productive for you, most focused, then let's make sure that we know what we're actually going to work on during that time, right? So that we don't waste the couple hours where we can really be focused. So a couple things: utilizing a planner, a planning sheet, or a calendar to organize and plan your day. And I'm going to jump down to this phrase. Our coaches talk about this a lot, but never start your day until it's finished on paper. So this may be a new experience for some of you, this idea that I'm actually going to project forward even my week and my day to look at what are my top priorities, what are the immovable appointments that are going to be in there, but even can I place in, this is when I'm going to walk my dog, right? Or this is when I'm going to have lunch with or breakfast or lunch with my spouse. Actually time blocking in the things that help us to maintain our productivity as well, right? So, so this is an important element for us. Plan the most important tasks first. Ideally, again, during your peak time, if you know that 8 to 12 is your most productive time, put your most critical tasks, block those into that time, right? Don't make it e-jail or something else. Block your tasks into that time. And like you said here, incorporate breaks, lunch, family time, other things in there that are going to keep you so that you don't, you're not in the basement over your computer for 10 hours and you you finally come up for breath, at the end of the day. So, so Justin, talk to us for just a minute, because I want to continue to power through these. What does this look like for you, and what's your daily habit and practice of planning and structure?
Yeah, so this one is super important for us because we work for ourselves and we really kind of determine what our day is. So if I let myself react to emails first thing in the morning and don't have a structure in place to tell myself what is truly important to be working on, it's really easy to get sidetracked and kind of you can lose a whole day kind of bouncing from project or email or communication or meeting or something like that.
Yeah.
And you look back at the end of the day and you're like, what did I do today? So
Yeah.
for me, what's really helpful is to keep it simple. I don't need a 10-page to-do list because that's just too much. It's overwhelming. I really like to just have a few things written down from the end of the day before that help me prioritize what I'm doing at the beginning of each day. So yeah. I know the night before I've written down, and sometimes I don't even remember it. I get there in the morning and I'm like, what am I working on today? Mm-hmm. And I know exactly what it is because I've written it down, but it just helps me kind of dig right into that project. And like we talked about before, I like to focus on the hardest, kind of what we call the most needle moving thing first thing in the morning. So I don't check email. I work on something, like for us, it's typically something more creative energy, like creating a recipe or writing a blog post, something that I know takes a lot of my mental energy that I need to kind of focus on without distractions. Yeah. And my other tip here, I think, that's helpful is if you can, try to kind of link those things that you're working on to your overarching goals. So it's really helpful for me to know that what I'm working on at this moment in time or this day kind of is helping me get towards my goal at the end of the day. Helps with motivation, which I think a lot of people struggle with working from home. So you give yourself that structure of, you're working on X, Y, and Z today by creating this plan. But you also, if you link it to your goals, you can really give yourself that motivation to actually plow through those things that you set out for yourself to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wanted to throw up the poll here to see how many of us are incorporating a practice like you're sharing, Justin. Are we planning each day and utilizing time blocking to incorporate your most productive times as well as family and wellness activities? And it looks like, we're all sort of there. I think that, as you said before, isn't this an important practice for any time really in life, whether you're working from home or you're working in an office space or going to a place of work? I think this is an incredible habit that needs to sort of carry over into the next normal for all of us. And so it looks like all of us could put some work in on this. And I know that I'm included there. I really want to encourage all of you after we send this out to access this weekly and daily planner tool. Our team put some time in that this week to just give you, hey, what does my week look like? Can I even get a preview of sort of my 3 goals for the week? And then there's a page for each day. What am I doing on Monday? A preview for the day, time block things out, sketch it out, my top 3 goals, other tasks that I want to get done. And so this is a really, really simple PDF tool that you could print out each week and just kind of sketch out, what am I doing this week? So I would encourage you each to download this piece. It's been really helpful for me and for our team. So time is flying. So we're going to go ahead and move on to tip number 5. And so we've sort of touched on this a little bit, Justin. So I'm going to ask that we kind of move through this piece, but love to see how this dovetails with everything else.
For sure. And I think we'll send this deck out, and I highly suggest everyone reads the blog post that we put together about curing your phone addiction, because I think that is the number one distraction in today's society is our phones, because we have this mini computer in our pocket right now that buzzes. We can check social media, take pictures with. There are so many things that we can easily get distracted by with our phone. So managing your phone is something that I think you need to do, is probably the number one piece of advice I can give you.
Yeah.
My tip is, when you're working, leave your phone in a separate room, put it on do not disturb for those key times in the morning. If that's your energy time, know you're going to have this block. So if it's not your phone, figure out what it is. So my kind of number one thing would be, figure out that thing that is your number one distraction and figure out how to eliminate it for a chunk of your day. Whether it's physically putting it away, going in the office, closing the door, putting on the headphones, whatever it is you need to do to kind of get rid of that distraction.
Yeah, and I'm feeling really challenged here, and I'll bring up the point here, the last one here, because you've challenged me in this way. Close out unnecessary programs and browser tabs. Justin's always joking with me when we're spending time together, like, how many tabs do you have open on your Chrome, right? And I'm sure that that could be similar for many of you. The one point that I would add here is that the phone piece is interesting right now, because we're also at home, right? And so there's been a lot more conversation that leaders have had with me of, well, my kid is like, hey, can you get off your phone, mom or dad, right? Because they're not normally seeing us in the midst of work and seeing how we move through things. And so that's a unique challenge right now. This article that Justin has created here about curing the phone addiction is really, really positive. So I would encourage you guys to check that out afterwards. But yeah, when can we have a moment in the day where we just clear some of that mental clutter so that we can be highly productive, highly focused? And that's more important now than ever, right? When our time is limited and as we're working from home.
And it's not only a benefit to your work life, it's a huge benefit to your personal life as well, to be able to distance yourself from the phone and be present with your family and friends.
Yeah, Tony Saldano said, I'm using too many tools, calendar, journal, Evernote, and so forth. And I agreed with him that sometimes we build too many tools that keep us distracted. So we're popping in between all of these different things. I know for many of us, we use lots of different programs in any given day to do our work and to stay productive. So that's an interesting piece to think about. Thanks for bringing that up, Tony. So I'm going to move on to number 6 here. And this is all about managing your energy. And this goes right along with determining your priorities for your week, for your day, determining what are the things that you're going to do at the beginning of your day to sort of start your day. And then we'll talk about the shutdown routine in just a moment here. But this concept that we talk about actually comes from my father's book, The Enemies of Excellence, where we talk about this idea about systematic renewal. And there's actually a tool linked that, again, you'll get in the deck after this. We all have certain energy cells, relational, physical, emotional, and we need to think very strategically about how we are replenishing each of those energy cells each day. And again, it's going to look different now, but we need to be very strategic about what those activities are. We are juggling a lot right now. So the mental load and stress is heavy, right? And so we need to figure out how we can reset, find ways to refresh, and remain productive. And so it can be things like you mentioned, it's a meditation, right? Would you agree, Justin, that helps to replenish sort of your mental energy, emotional energy, so that you can turn and be productive in your work and in the relationships around you?
Yeah, I think those little things that work for you, that help replenish your energy and not drain your energy, are the things you need to focus on. And they don't need to be super time consuming or anything crazy or elaborate. Maybe it's maintaining a gratitude journal or something like that, like helps you appreciate things and puts you in the right mood. Or it's a quick meditation, or it's you go for a quick walk after lunch to get outside and kind of let things go for a minute, or you do it after work or whatever it is. But it helps kind of get you out of that setting. And then if you need to go back to work, you can kind of refocus and reset pretty easily.
Yeah. And so I would encourage each of us, to take a moment of assessment to really think through what are those specific activities that replenish me emotionally, physically, mentally, and relationally. And how do we build those into our rhythm? Knowing that the rhythm is, we have to be a bit flexible with it right now, right? A lot of our normal rituals and routines have sort of gone by the wayside. But we need to be strategic about incorporating those pieces there. So in the chat for a moment, as we're transitioning to the next best practice, put in there how you identify what some of those activities actually look like. What are the things that help to replenish your energy so that you can be more productive and continue to make this working from home space happen for you? So Justin, we're gonna move on to 7 here. And I'm gonna let you kind of take this one. You've been in the work from home space a little bit more. So talk to me about this one for just a minute here.
Yeah, this one was kind of a tough one for us when we transitioned from the natural corporate setting where you have coworkers and you're able to get that human connection pretty easily. So I learned pretty quickly that I needed to kind of prioritize that human connection. So for me, that was getting out in the coffee shops, making sure I had time with friends scheduled, going to group workouts, whatever it was that kind of gave me energy. Now it's a little different without that physical human connection, but I think it's still important while working from home to prioritize things like these Zoom calls, making sure you're having contact with your team or your coworkers that you used to have through these kind of face-to-face. Using the technology that we have, we can still kind of have that human connection even though we're physically distant. So making that a priority, because it's easy to kind of just hunker down at home, be behind your computer working all day, and maybe you have like email connection or something like that, but really getting that kind of FaceTime can help your energy, help you kind of get out of the home world a little bit, and can be super helpful for working from home.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of touch on this point at the bottom here, and this is a little bit more towards maybe sort of connecting with your team and team leadership, but this is actually a moment for us to create deeper connections with people on our team, deeper connections with our family and our relationships. And even though it has to be mediated by a digital space, which I know is unique for us, this is actually time to deepen our relationships and become more transparent. I listened to a podcast by Patrick Lencioni this week, and he talked about, this is a moment for the rise of personalism, right? I mean, you're seeing me in my home, right? And Justin, I'm seeing you in your home, and you're seeing lots of people in their normal day-to-day. So let's use that, not to say, oh, let's try to make sure that we're professional when we get on our calls, but no, let's actually use that to drive deeper connection with our community and with those people around us. And I guess what I would say is that what we've seen from leaders is in the goal of trying to be as productive as they can in this moment, some of this prioritizing human connection is going away. So, hey, we're jumping on a Zoom call for 10 minutes. Let's make sure we hit the high priority items, right? But really what we need to spend some time on is just like we've been doing in our groups, Justin, let's do a checkup from the neck up. What's going on with people? And we all need that human connection right now. So I would encourage you to feel free to spend some more time there in prioritizing that human connection because it's very, very important for us. Justin, let's move on to number 8 here. And I'm going to touch on it quickly because, man, we've been having good conversation, and I want to get to a couple of the questions here. So you put communicate, communicate, communicate. And what we found is that this is a moment for over communication, not under communication with our team, with our coworkers, because again, isolation and is social isolation, right? And physical isolation is our reality, but let's try to make sure that it doesn't consume us. So set a schedule for some check-ins. Make sure you're still having maybe some stand-up meetings with your teams or people in your organization. Clearly defining expectation, what needs to be done. And when in doubt, it's better to overdo it than to not communicate at all. So this is a moment for us to to focus on communicating and prioritizing the human connection with our teams. Anything you want to add there?
I would say just kind of the bonus tip is a key one as well, is think about what form of communication you're using. Are you using the right form of communication? Are you texting or emailing when a quick phone call would be better? Or if the check-in should be via Zoom, or getting that human connection time. So making sure you're thinking about what is the not only effective but efficient way to communicate.
Yeah, that's good. So just a quick poll here. I've established a new communication rhythm with my colleagues and my team, including maybe some group communication and one-on-one where needed, that helps us to stay connected. So take a quick moment to answer that. And I want to draw your attention also to a tool that we've included, again, that you'll get after this. It's a quick one-on-one meeting prep form. So if you're engaging with a manager or somebody else in a one-on-one space, or you're doing that for team members that you manage, this is just a quick form to help make that connection as valuable as possible in the middle of all this. So I would encourage you to download that piece as well. So it looks like, yeah, many of you have sort of answered this rhythm. When we had some of this communication with some teams a couple weeks ago, I would say it would have been more on the sort of and no space, because I think it's taken a while for people to figure out what those rhythms look like. But it looks like there's some good movement there. If you haven't established that, sit down and make sure that that you can figure out what that rhythm looks like for you and your team. Again, prioritizing some time for human connection. Okay, Justin, last couple here. So we'll move on to this issue of production, not necessarily hours worked. And this is unique for you in that no one's telling you how many hours you're going to work, Justin, right? So this may be a little bit different for some of our attendees, but what does this look like for you to focus on production?
For me, this was a kind of really important mindset shift, going from corporate environment where you're kind of expected to put in set hours or even super long hours at times, where you're physically in the office, versus being at home and running your own schedule. I kind of was in that mindset of, oh, I have to work 8 to 5 or whatever it is, as opposed to really focusing on, am I achieving my goals, and am I being productive throughout the day? And going back to kind of managing the energy, sometimes you can get to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you know you're done at work, but you're kind of physically staying there till 5, but you haven't really done anything in those last 2 hours. I think it's important, you're working from home, you kind of have that flexibility to check in with your energy and kind of let it go when you don't need it. So as opposed to just like powering through and having a time mindset, I really like to have more of a production mindset and think about, what did I get done today, and really kind of help cheer myself on through that by looking at, what did I achieve versus what time did I spend at work today?
Yeah, and that goes right back to, and even the planner that we'll include in the download link, is if you don't know what you really need to get focused and get done, you can't get to the end of the day and check it off and say, yeah, I got those things done, right? But for many of us who have been in a hourly mindset, or that we work 40 hours a week, and that's kind of how we measure our value, this is a new experience, I think, to say, no, actually, I got my projects done. I know there's always more that can be done, but my critical items are finished, and it may not take 8 hours. I may not even be able to dedicate 8 hours to it right now, or 10 hours, or however long you were working beforehand, right? So this is a moment for us to get very focused on actually, production, not just, filling time, like you're saying, and measuring our value as a worker in that space. So just a quick poll here. I am establishing clear goals and projects and tasks to complete each week and each day to keep me focused on production, not just hours worked. I think this is a new shift for many of us. Oh, good. I'm happy to see that the poll is, a lot of you are saying yes, which is fantastic. Great. That's great. Well, good. Well, look at this, Justin. Overwhelmingly, it looks like some people have figured out this best practice, which is fantastic. Really excited about that,
Great.
because this can be again an effective practice for when you do go back into a space where there's a little bit more expectation around hourly, right? One thing I want to bring up that came in a private message to me is, what if my boss or manager is expecting me to try to do 40 hours of work, at home? Um, we can't speak to that specific scenario, but what I would say is the more that you can document, here are the projects that I think are most critical and the things that I've been tasked to do, and document that you are completing those and demonstrating that you're able to do that in an efficient amount of time. That's a really important step to be able to communicate to a manager or somebody who is maybe a little bit more stuck in the hourly mindset. So just an encouragement, even more so, to make sure that we're documenting what that looks like for us.
I think also asking your manager and having them set clear priorities as to what they want you to achieve, so you can report back to them, hey, you wanted me to do X, Y, and Z. Here's what I accomplished. So you're on the same page with, they not only know you're working, but you're also hitting those milestones that they want you to be working on versus just putting in the time.
Yep. Fantastic. Okay, Justin, we're at the last one here, and I know that we maybe going a few minutes late here. May have to answer the questions offline. But the last one here is really important, and it goes with the morning routine, and then how do we cap our day? How do we cap our work day whenever that time is?
Yeah, so this is super important just mentally, I think, more than anything, to not be constantly working all the time. So find those couple of things that tell you that work is over, tells your mind, maybe it's something physical, maybe it's, like I said, getting up and going for a walk at the end of the day, kind of get you that drive time that you used to have from the office to home. So you need to transition from work you to home you, even though you may not really physically be leaving home. So for me, one thing that's really effective is taking kind of 15 minutes at the end of each day to plan out what are my top priorities in the beginning of the next day, so I don't start the next day cold.
Yeah.
Kind of physically closing your computer, shutting the door to your office if you have that. Just those little things that tell your mind and your body, like, okay, work's over for the day. I can let it go. It's okay. I have everything on my to-do list. It'll be there tomorrow. And now I'm transitioning into home version of myself and not work version.
Yeah, and this is a tricky one, like you're saying. We don't have that time to decompress, and so sometimes the stress of work now is it's just swirling in us and around us all the time. And so, how do you create some separation there? I love the idea of, take 15 minutes to plan out. Okay, check off, what did I get done today? Look at the planner for the next day. What did I do here? And it's an interesting space. I think what I've experienced a little bit, and some people are sharing even in the chat, that it seems like there might be a couple shutdown times throughout the day now, right? It's like I go from 8 to 12, and then I shut things down, and I'm with my family or kids from 12 to 2, and then I might pick up work again and might have to shut it down at 5 for dinner, and then I might have some other things in the evening that I have to attend to, depending upon the nature of our jobs. And so it may not actually happen like it would in that 8 to 5 time frame, but what does that ritual look like, to where my mind and my physical body and my space is sort of, I close it down for a bit, I set things down mentally and physically, and then I can pick them up again later with focus. So I don't know how that works for you. I'm sure that you do some of that throughout the day, both and. So
Yeah, I think it's easy to be on all the time. I think you guys could say that in the office, right? You come from the office and then you're checking emails on your phone at
yeah.
night. So it's really just establishing what are my barriers, what is my kind of shutdown time, and you're making choices every time you pick up your phone and check email. You're choosing to work. So
Mhm.
think about the choices you're making. And my choice for my personal mental health is usually to have this shutdown routine where I get the space in the evening to decompress and let things go, and then come back to work more refreshed the next day, and
Yeah.
not have the last email that I read right before I went to bed weighing on my mind all night and thinking about it and kind of disrupting my sleep. So
Yeah.
learning how to shut it off is more for me mental than anything.
Yeah, and I launched the poll just to give us a sense. I've developed and implemented a shutdown routine at the end of the day that helps me mentally and physically to separate myself from my work. It looks like we're kind of mixed there. There's some no's, some sort of, some yeses. So, I mean, even for me, this is a positive encouragement to work on this best practice a little bit more. And I think it's something that you're always kind of working on, right? Is figuring out how to create those boundaries. But we don't have the physical separation now that sort of makes that boundary happen for us, right? We have to create that structure for ourselves. Olivia Morris put in the chat, dining room table has to be cleared before dinner, so we've got to put work stuff away. That's been a good shutdown ritual. I like that idea. And I know right now our dinner table is also where we're teaching our kiddos and doing some homeschooling. So yeah, if we can kind of clear that space off, I think that's a really good physical representation of moving forward there. So well, good. Well, Justin, I'm so glad we got to engage in this conversation. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute here, and really, really appreciate it. There were a couple questions here, and we may need to take these offline now that we're 6 minutes over. Appreciate you guys staying with us. Can you address building some flexibility into your plan? There's something super demotivating about having a great plan get derailed. How can you proactively plan for that? So any quick thoughts there? Barry's also put some thoughts there, which I think are really helpful. But yeah, sometimes it's hard when you plan your priorities for the day and then it all goes up in smoke. How do you adjust to that mindset? And I'm sure you've had some experiences like that.
Yeah, I think it's just knowing that that's inevitable and allowing yourself some forgiveness. Also, like Barry said, building some flexibility. So knowing, for me, I like to plan some kind of admin time that I know I'm going to need throughout the day. Knowing that you can't be 100% focused and productive all the time. It's just not, no one has that energy to maintain focus for 8 hours a day. It's not humanly possible. So allow yourself to be human, allow life to happen. I think for me, the one thing that's helpful is I don't try to plan out my entire week. I might have an idea of what I'm going to get done that week and kind of the key points, but I really only try to plan out the next day, because then if I don't get something done on Tuesday, it's really easy to just move it to Wednesday morning and knock it out Wednesday morning. So I just allow myself that and know that that you're not always going to hit all your milestones. It feels awesome when you do, but give yourself, allow yourself to not hit those as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up a critical point. I think right now we have to have a lot of grace and empathy with both ourselves and our team members and colleagues. I mean, this is a unique situation, and yeah, if the plan gets derailed, we have to give ourselves some grace and flexibility there. So, well, Justin, I can't thank you enough for sharing your best practices with us, and to answer Carolyn's question and a few others. We will send out an email with the deck and all the links in there as well. And we can even put the physical documents there. Before we go, the last thing I'm going to put in the chat here is I want to invite you that you're welcome to join us in our community space. This conversation is going to continue here. I would love to hear what best practices were not talked about that you've learned, or maybe some way that you've adapted these best practices to work for you in this current moment. And I know that some of you had to go, and so we'll also send that in the links afterwards. But join us in that space as we continue the conversation of how to work most effectively from home in applying some of these best practices. So with that, Justin, I'll let you get back to your daughter. I'm going to go see my daughter and get back into our rhythms of working from home. So have a great rest of your productive day. Everybody who joined us, have a great rest of your productive day. And oh, good, Justin, you put in your website as well.
I was just going to say, if anyone's interested, or I know everyone's cooking a lot from home right now, so check out our website. We have a lot of healthy recipes, easy, quick stuff that, you can make with hopefully things that you're able to find at the store pretty easily. So we'd love it if you checked out our website and all the work and resources we put into it. We'd be happy if you checked it out.
That's fantastic. Great. Well, good. Well, as you go, just would love to get a little thought of the value of this conversation for you. Want to make sure that that we're continuing to provide some great thought leadership in addressing some of the challenges that we're all going through right now. Also put in the chat if there's something that you feel like is a conversation that needs to happen for a broader leadership and business community, just put it in the chat down there, and we'd love to work with you to address that. So again, thanks for staying with us about 10 minutes over. I know some people had to leave, and thanks again for your time today, Justin, and excited to continue learning in this space. So
yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
all right. Thanks everybody. So we're going to come off video. We'll leave it up for just a minute as everybody exits, and have a great rest of your work from home day.